one of the really important keys in financial wholeness for your life. We mentioned this morning that 60% of marriages that end in divorce because of financial problems and worries. And so we realize this, that if we can address the issue in all of our lives of financial stress, anxiety, and know what principles to put in place in order to be financially whole, then the reality is this, is we can cut the amount of people getting divorced. Because 60% of divorces happen in this country because of financial pressure and woe. Church, we are committed to you to bring a holistic approach to the gospel. You're going to find in this next 12 months, we're going to be preaching around many different subjects. But a church that doesn't talk about money is not truly serious about discipleship and development of its people. And we want to see your 2015 move forward. We want to see you get to the end of 2015 and think to yourself, you know what, I'm better now in my finances than what I was when I came in. I'm better. I've got a plan. I've got an exit strategy from this rat race. I don't want to just serve the man, but I want to serve the man. How many of you know what I'm talking about? That's why we're talking about subjects like this throughout the year. You know, back in the day when Hollywood made their early movies, they weren't so interested in the translations that they would use. They wouldn't really bring experts onto the screen to the script writing process to really kind of analyze what words were being said through these people on screen from other nations. One famous movie was one that Hollywood wrote, Hollywood scripted, and they decided that what they needed in the most poignant moment in the movie, they needed somebody who spoke Swahili. And this person speaking Swahili would deliver the crucial line at the right moment, and in doing so would bring a gasp or even a cry to the audience. It was the linchpin. It was the most poignant moment in the movie. And it was well received through America and through the United Kingdom and parts of the world until they played this movie in Nairobi where they speak Swahili. And in that poignant moment when that runner was meant to come to the chief and deliver the perfect line that was going to bring that beautiful moment, that climax to the movie that would cause people to go, no, that's terrible. The translation actually, instead of bringing weight and shock to the audience, brought a whole heap of hilarity to the audience. Because what the director did is he found a local Englishman who said he spoke Swahili, but he didn't really speak Swahili. So in the moment of moments in the movie, as the runner comes to see the chief, he falls to the ground, bloodied, bruised, and sweating. He gasps this out. He says, "I do not think I'm being paid enough to play this part." And Nairobi burst into laughter because translation was not right. Now listen, I tell that story because most people live their life with that statement. Yeah. Very true. This whole idea of discontent. Continually discontent. It doesn't matter what the job is. It doesn't matter how much money you got coming in, where you live. Our problem is this: discontentment rules supreme because we have Instagram and Twitter, and everybody else's life looks much better than ours. And it's a tragedy to live with discontentment being the thing that rules and ruins the day. One great sage of the age, he said this: freedom is not obtained by full enjoyment of what is desired, but by controlling our desires. Let me say that again. If you're taking notes, this is a tweetable moment. Freedom is not obtained by full enjoyment of what is desired, but by controlling our desires. And you know, when it comes to financial wholeness, if we can come from a starting point of contentment, it'll change the way we make decisions when it comes to spending money. One of our great men in our church, I'm not going to tell you who he is because I wouldn't want to embarrass him publicly, but 2 Sundays ago, he called Sophie and showed Sophie something. Sophie called me over, and I went and said, "What is it?" He says, "Glyn, I want to show you my credit card." And I don't know if he's done this credit card in anticipation of this series or something like that, but on his credit card is a picture of me. I'm not even kidding. With my arm around him and my arm around his wife. And I'm like, that's amazing. Why am I on your credit card? He says, because when it comes to spending, I see your face and I ask myself the question, do I really need to purchase this thing? That's amazing. What a legend. That's incredible. So we have Glyn Barrett, Audacious Church credit cards down the back here. My picture on, available for you for only $9.99 a month. Comes with amazing 15,000% interest. Call quidco.com. And I want to ask you a question. What do you think makes you happy? What do you think you need more of in order to be more happy? Well, I hope you read. I hope you're a reader. I hope you're somebody who kind of listens to podcasts, because there's so much out there that can help us with this. And in November 2014, just 3 months ago or so, the Wall Street Journal put out an article on contentment, on money. And I thought it was so good that I would get the man who has the voice for radio, to come up here to join me on stage and to read this article. This is going to take about 5 minutes, but I want you to kind of sit back, relax, and listen to this truth from an amazing secular teacher on finance and about contentment. Pastor Stuart.
It's an age-old question. Can money buy happiness? Latest research suggests wealth alone doesn't provide any guarantee of a good life. What matters a lot more than a big income is how people spend it. Andrew Blackman made 5 points in the Wall Street Journal. Number 1, experiences are worth more than you think. Studies find that people think material purchases offer better value for money because experiences are fleeting and material goods last longer. But research found that when people look back at their purchases, they realize that experiences actually provided better value. Experiences tend to meet more of our underlying psychological needs. They're often shared with other people, giving us a greater sense of connection, and they form a bigger part of our sense of identity. If you've climbed in the Himalayas, that's something you'll always remember and talk about, long after your favorite gadget has gone to the landfill. His second point was this: try giving it away. The paradox of money is that although earning more of it tends to enhance our well-being, we become happier by giving it away than by spending it on ourselves. What moves the needle in terms of happiness is not the amount you give, but the perceived impact of your donation. If you can see your money making a difference in other people's lives, it will make you happy even if the amount you gave was quite small. His third point was this: be sure to buy time too. It's also important to consider how what you're buying will affect how you spend your time. The big house in the suburbs may seem like a good idea, but the University of Zurich found that people with longer commutes reported lower overall life satisfaction, all other things being equal. They calculated that you need a raise of 40% to offset the added misery of a 1-hour commute. Use money to buy yourself better time. Don't buy a slightly fancier car so you can have a heated seat during your 2-hour commute. Buy a place close to work so you can use the final hour of daylight to kick a ball in the park with your kids. Another way to buy yourself time is by outsourcing tasks you dislike. His fourth point was this: money only brings happiness up to a point. When looking at all the research results, there's an important caveat to bear in mind. Those in the field divide happiness into 2 components, and you need to have both parts working together to be truly happy. But only one of these components keeps improving the more you earn. The other tops out after a certain point. The first measure of happiness is evaluative, or a sense that your life is good. You're satisfied with your life. You're progressing towards your life goals. The other component of happiness, affective, looks at how often you experience positive emotions like joy, affection, or tranquility, as opposed to the negative ones. They found you could be satisfied with your overall life, but you may not actually be happy all the time. The bottom line, when you don't have much money, a little extra can go a long way because you have more essential needs to fulfill. As you accumulate more wealth, however, it becomes more difficult to keep buying happiness. His fifth and final point was this: don't get in over your head. Researchers agree, spending more than you can afford is a route to misery. Some studies, meanwhile, have shown that debt has a detrimental effect on happiness, while savings and financial security tend to boost it. A survey of British households found that those with higher levels of debt reported lower happiness. And a separate piece of research on married couples showed that those in more debt had more marital conflict. He concluded with this statement: savings are good for happiness. Debt is bad for happiness. But debt is more potently bad than savings are good.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stu. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30 says this: it is healthy to be content, but envy will eat you up. Ecclesiastes 6, verse 9, it is better to be satisfied with what you have than to always be wanting something else. Let me give you some keys, church, to being content. How can you be content? The first way is this, is learn to enjoy what you have. It's one of those simple yet profound things, to learn to enjoy what you have. Do you remember the old song, Count Your Blessings? Name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, something else as well. Then you'll see how amazing God has been. To learn to enjoy that which you have. I read a story about a man who was envious of his friends, his work colleagues, because they had houses that were bigger. They had houses that were more luxurious. And though his house had been good to this point, his envy of what he saw in others caused him to desire something different. And so what he did was this: he put his house on the market. He contacted some real estate agents. He said, listen, I'd like to put my house on. And so they did. They put it online. They put it in some magazines. They put it in a newspaper. And then he began avidly researching for a bigger, better property, something that would more suit his needs for his life. One day, about a week later, he found himself reading the local newspaper and read an article, an extract, a for sale ad about a house. He was so excited because as he read the article, as he read the for sale wording, he realized that is my perfect house. And so he phoned the estate agent and he said, listen, I'm interested in purchasing this house. And they began to get into a lengthy conversation. And after a while, there was a pause. And the estate agent came back and said to him, but sir, that is the house that you already have. It's the house that you're trying to sell. He was so blessed with what he had, he didn't realize what it was to enjoy what God had given him. And you know, church, when it comes to contentment, the first thing is this, is learn to enjoy what God has given you. Stop for a moment. Smell the roses. Wake up tomorrow morning, and instead of complaining about the dishes that need washing, thank God that there are people that you get to wash dishes for. Because you could be in a home where you're just you. But the fact that there's a mess means that there's someone there to make a mess. And God, though I don't like the mess, I'm thankful for the people who are in this house that make the mess. You know what? The first way to enjoy, to have contentment in life and to move forward in finance from a point of contentment is this. Learn to enjoy what you have. The Wall Street Journal, I cut out an extract. It said this: one of the main reasons why having more stuff will not make us more happy is that we adapt to it. Human beings are remarkably good at getting used to change in their lives, especially positive changes. If you have a rise in income, it gives you a boost, but then your aspirations rise too. Maybe you want to buy a bigger home in a new neighborhood, and so your neighbors are richer. You start wanting more. You stepped on the hedonic treadmill. Trying to prevent that or slow it down is really a challenge. It could be as simple as setting aside time every day to follow that traditional advice of counting your blessings. Increasing variety, novelty, or surprise can also help you to enjoy your professions more. When things become unchanging, that's when you adapt to them. One professor said this: if you keep a painting hanging on the wall in the same spot for an extended amount of time, you will stop noticing it after a while. Try this. Move the painting. Swap the painting into another room, and you will see that painting with fresh eyes, and you will begin to appreciate it all the more. It's talking about learning to enjoy what you do have instead of focusing your attention on what you don't have. Excuse me, I've got a cold. The Bible says this, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 19. If God gives a man wealth and property, he should be grateful and enjoy what he has. It is a gift from God. So whether your house is small or it's big, it is a gift from God. And the Bible says that we should enjoy it. 1 Timothy 6:17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. When you understand that God has given you these things for your enjoyment, and you actually, church, stop and begin to say, God, I want to thank you for this. I thank you for this. My children have prayer journals, and every night we pray through different things. And what I love about this is it gives us an opportunity with our children to actually thank God for things. We thank God for our church. We thank God for our city. Every morning, Sophie preached on this, as we drive over Barton Bridge next to the Trafford Centre on the way into school, we're able to look out over the city, and every morning we do this, we actually speak out a blessing of thanks to God over the city of Manchester. When you learn to appreciate what you have, I will never forget being a child in a church in Australia. Back in the day when the missionaries would come, do you remember that? And they would come with these good old-fashioned reel-to-reel video films of where they were doing mission activity. And I'll never forget kind of watching these, and probably one that moved my heart the most was an image of so many children in India. And one day, I just kind of knew that God was going to send me to India. I just had a passion and a dream for the kids of India. Do you know something? I've not been to India yet. And even though we've had many invites to go and to do different things, we just haven't felt yet the release of God to go to India. But I will never forget what this missionary said one day. He was showing us images of all these children in India. And he said this, he said, you know, church, he said, about 8 months ago, I was going through the streets of Mumbai, and I was really beginning to complain about my shoes because I had old shoes. And I thought to myself, where are the churches in the rich West? Why aren't they sending me money for shoes? Why aren't they sending me a new batch of shoes? And he said, and I got a bad attitude about the fact that my shoes were old. My shoes, the stitching had come undone. And I was starting to get holes on the bottom of my shoes. And I began to get a bad attitude about it. And he said, and then I'll never forget the moment that I met a man with no feet. And everything changed. And then I changed and I said, God, thank you for my old shoes. You understand, church? Learning to enjoy what you've got. Your car may be clapped out, the heating may not work, you may have to get the ice off the outside and the inside, but thank God you've got one. And it may be not as sweet as the guy next door to you, but you've got one. And enjoyment, learning to enjoy that place of contentment. God, thank you for what you've given me. The second key to contentment is this, is don't compare with other people. Refuse the temptation to do so. 2 Corinthians 10:12, we do not dare classify or compare ourselves. It is not wise. Exodus 20 verse 17, you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. You know, 100 years ago in Manchester, back when industry and mills were taking place, there was one young man in our city whose job, he had an incredible job at the local factory. His job was to be the timekeeper. He had to wind the clock at the top of the mill. He had to keep the time right. And before we had internet and before we had Apple that set the time automatically for us, that was his job. And he kind of saw this as an awesome privilege and responsibility. When many of the lads go into the factory, they would have to go down into the basement and work in different parts, the hot, the smelly parts. His first thing was this. He got to go up to the clock tower, and in winding the clock and checking the time, what he would do is he would get a great view out over the city of Manchester, dirty and industrial and full of smog though it was. And he thought, what an incredible thing, incredible job that I have. On one particular day, he was walking into the factory, and as he walked into the factory, he walked past the expensive clock shop that he would always walk past on his way to work. And the reason he walked past this clock shop in Manchester was because there was an expensive gold clock in the window, a clock that would be more expensive than 10 years' salary for him. And what he would do is he would set his stopwatch, his pocket watch, according to the expensive clock in the window. He would then go to the factory and he would set the time of the clock according to the expensive clock that was in the expensive shop. He did this every day. After a few months, the new owner of the clock shop saw this man standing there every day in the window with his pocket watch. And after a few months, he comes out and he says to this man, he says, I notice you every morning standing outside the window. Why do you do that? And he said this, he said, my job is incredible. I have the honor and opportunity of setting the clock in the tower just down the road so that the men know when to clock on and clock off. If I get that wrong, then everything's wrong. And the shop owner started to laugh. He laughed. He said this. He said, that's hilarious. He said, you know, all these months I've actually been setting this clock according to the clock that you wind and set the time by. You know what happens when we compare? We're actually comparing to a standard that's just an image. That's not real. That person that lives next to you, they may have a nicer car than you have, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Church, we've said it before. Instagram is not real. It's not real. It's a facade. It's amazing. I was with Pastor Gary Clark from Hillsong last week, and I'd said to him last year when I was there, and I said, man, the images of the conference in Sydney, it looks so big. And he said this, he said, yeah, you know, photos lie though, don't they? And I thought, isn't that just the case? Have you noticed your heroes, young people, the people that you follow on Twitter and Instagram, they'll never put pictures up there really of their bad hair days or look at the size of this pimple. It's the biggest pimple ever. They're never going to put on their bills. They're never going to put on their credit card balances. What happens is people put on there a facade that is just not real. And the second key to contentment is this: don't compare. Lydia, I love the message you shared tonight. God made you you. And we don't want you to be anyone else. Wouldn't it be terrible if you were like my Georgia? Because you can't be like my Georgia. Georgia's unique the way she's made. And Lydia, you're beautiful just the way you are. You answer people's questions. You're the solution to problems on this planet. You're amazing. And I want to encourage you again, don't ever fall into the trap of comparing yourself with someone else, because God says you're unique. You've got a unique fingerprint, tongue print, eye print. Everything about you is so unique. In fact, when he made you, he said, you're so perfect, I'm going to throw away the mold. You're beautiful just the way you are. The church is true for every single one of us. Let's never compare. Let's never compare. It's a tragedy. Listen, if you're going to compare to anything, though, compare to this. This week when you go home, take out all the furniture of your house except one table and 2 chairs. Use your blankets and some sort of padding for your bed. Secondly, take away all your clothing except your oldest outfit and leave only 1 pair of your oldest shoes. Empty the kitchen cupboards and the fridge, except for a bag of flour, sugar, salt, potatoes, onions, and a few beans. Fourthly, close off the bathroom, stop the water, and remove all of your electrics. Fifthly, move your family out of your house into the garden shed. Sixthly, move your garden shed into a shanty town where there are other sheds. Seventhly, horror of horrors, cancel Wi-Fi, which is no great loss because you can't read anyway. Number 8, leave only 1 radio for the whole of the shanty town. Number 9, Move the hospital 10 miles away. Of course, you've got no doctors or medication. Just get a midwife there to work and do everything. Number 10, throw away all of your money apart from just £5. Number 11, raise a meager crop. Give 1/10 of your money to money lenders and 1/3 of it to the landlord. Number 12, cut off 25 or more years of life expectancy. Number 13, have one toilet for 50 different shanty houses. And that, my friend, is how 92% of the world live. Count your blessings. Name them one by one. Count your blessings. See what God has done. Come on, let's not live the comparison game. You're always going to be hurting. You're always going to be broken when you compare. The third thing is this. Remember, life is not about things. Proverbs 30 verse 7. Oh God, I ask for 2 things from you before I die. First, help me to never tell a lie. Secondly, give me neither to poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. For if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, who is the Lord? And if I am too poor, I may steal and thus insult God's holy name. Isn't the Bible amazing? That's actually in the Bible. Luke 12:15. Jesus said, watch out and guard yourselves from every kind of greed, because your true life is not made up of the things you own, no matter how rich you may be. Here's what Jesus is saying. The important thing is not the things. I need that iPhone 6 Plus. I need it. Well, in 2 years' time, it's going to be in the landfill. It's going to be recycled. Jesus is saying, you know what? The important thing is not the things. It's the people I've put in your life. Church, let's thank God that He's given us each other. Let's thank God that we have this church. Let's thank God that we've got this crazy, amazing worship team who write the most ridiculously good songs. You know, we take it for granted, but thank God that we have it. God, you're so good. And I want to finish here, and I need the 2 guys come up and help me with this rope, if you can do that. The fourth thing is this: focus on what will last forever. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 18. We fix our attention not on the things that are seen, but on things that are unseen. For what can be seen lasts only for a time, but what cannot be seen lives forever. You know what the Bible does? The Bible teaches us about eternity. Just pull that tight, boys. Eternity. I want you to see this rope. What this rope does is this rope represents more than time. This rope represents eternity. Eternity, which has no beginning and no end. We worship a God who has no beginning and He has no end. And yet there came a moment when God decided to make time. God created time, and He made Adam and Eve, and then there was a garden, and then there were the Israelites. There was the great Exodus. And we read through the history from Bible. We read through the history, the writings of Josephus and others, and we have generation after generation, people just like you and I, people just like Solomon wrote about this morning. Wealth will never bring happiness because you always live to the limit of your income. We learned about this, and for generations, for thousands of years, people have been getting up, going to work, coming home, getting up, going to work. There have been millions of people over the millennia, people thousands of years who've had dreams and aspirations for family, for business, for investment. People have come, people have gone. When I used to do lectures in our academies and things like that, one of my subjects, one of the days that I would do is this: I'd take the students to a cemetery. It's amazing what you can learn walking around a cemetery. It's sobering. Discovered this, and nobody ever goes on a date to a cemetery, do they? Try that with your wife sometime. Hey, honey, thought we'd go on a date. It's date night. Let's go to the local cemetery. Bad move. It's also a bad move. I don't know who designed it this way, but back in, yesteryear, the idea was this: you'd build a church and then build a cemetery around the outside. It's a bad PR problem for the church, that. You got to walk through dead people to get to church. Forget that. We will not have a cemetery. You can burn me and scatter my ashes anywhere you want. The Etihad Stadium, in the goal there. That'd be all right. What was the score? Yeah. So you weren't really listening. You were watching the game. Is that what you're doing? Here's what I want you to see. I need you to imagine this rope just goes on forever this way. And it goes on forever that way. There's no beginning, no end. See this here? That's your life. That's it. And it's amazing how here, what happens here with our life is you're here and you're saying, you know what, I'm saving, I can't wait until I get to here. My life is all about this moment right here. Can't wait to retire. I'm going to travel the world. And being a Christian over the years, people have said to me, are you stupid? Why would you make decisions like that? What do you mean you go to church? What do you mean you're not having sex before you get married? What do you mean you're not taking drugs and getting drunk? How come you're not living the life? Are you stupid? And I think to myself, are you? Because you're making decisions in the moment and it's just here, but you've completely forgotten that all of this is determined by what you do here. I need that car to make my life complete. Really? I need that job. If I get that job, that's going to be the answer to all my problems. Really? We fix our attention not on the things that are seen, but on things that are unseen. What can be seen lasts only for a time, but what can not be seen lasts forever. The book of James, it says this, what is your life? Your life is like a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. And we have a generation of men and women who all they think about is this. All they think about is the moment, what they can get in the moment, the gratification of the moment, and forget to realize that eternity waits. I've told you this story. I sat on a plane out of Melbourne. And thanks, boys. You can just put that on the floor. Good job. Well done. Excellent. Let's give them a hand. I sat on a plane and I'd been bumped up to my first class flight. I've only ever happened to me twice on first class, and it was amazing to sit there. And the man next to me, I've told you this story, he had the biggest nose I've ever seen. And I wrote this sermon for young people on the size of this guy's nose. It was going to be an awesome message. And while I was looking at him, my mouth was open, thinking, man, that's a big nose. He looked at me. I said, g'day. He said, g'day. I said, g'day. I closed my mouth. And he said, oh, you Australian? I said, no, not really, but I grew up in Australia. He goes, well, where are you from? I said, oh, you wouldn't have heard it. He said, no, tell me. I said, oh, I grew up in a little place called Toowoomba. He goes, shut up. I was born in Toowoomba. I'm like, no way. What was it like in the 17th century? Because this guy was really old. If you know anything about Aussies, the more sarcastic you are with them, the more they'll love you. So he swore at me. I shan't tell you what he said. We're talking about nothing really serious. Just talking, where you off to. He told me where he's off to. And then the plane takes off and I put my seat back. I've got the first class pajamas on that they gave me. And I start to watch a movie, Pirates of the Caribbean 4. And as I'm watching Pirates of the Caribbean 4, I go, I've seen that nose before. And next to me in seat 2A is the very same nose from Pirates of the Caribbean 4. So the movie finishes, credits roll. He taps me on the shoulder. He says, how'd you enjoy the movie? I said, brilliant. I said, how long have you been acting? He began to share with me a little bit about his life, how long he's been acting, and began to ask him questions about Hollywood, about the actors, about what's going on, and Brad and Angelina and all these sort of things. Do you know them? Yeah, no, Johnny Depp. Yeah, I'm good friends with Johnny. And began to tell these stories to me, and amazing stories, and all these sort of things. And then he said to me, what do you do? I said, I'm a pastor. He said, you're an Italian chef. I said, shut up. He said to me this. He said, I can imagine trying to tell people about a God they don't want, they don't believe in, they can't see, they can't experience. It's probably the hardest job in the world. I said, in actual fact, I got the easiest job in the world. He said, so try me. So I did. He wasn't going anywhere, was he? I mean, he was, 600 knots, but he was going there with me. And so for the next kind of 5-6 hours, we talked. And it was amazing to have a conversation with this Hollywood A-lister about Jesus. And we had the opportunity to pray together. It was an amazing opportunity to do so. His heart softened. At first, he's like, oh, you're a religious freak. I'm like, no, I'm not a religious freak. I've got a relationship with God. It makes a massive difference. We began to talk about it. It was an amazing conversation. And many times people have said to me, it must be hard to try to convince people to become a Christian. I'm like, no, you don't understand. You can't convince anyone to be a Christian. It's a revelation. It's something that happens. You have a moment with God and you realize everything I've lived for, everything I've strived for, it's nothing without a connection with the God of heaven who breathed life into me in the first place. And I was once in a session and I began to talk about this in the context of what Ecclesiastes 3:11 says. It says this: God has set eternity into the hearts of men. Every single person has eternity in there. Every single person on this planet, in this city, there's a little part of them that's trying to reconnect with the creator of heaven and earth. When Michelangelo carved the statue of David, they said, "How did you do that?" He said this, he said, "The statue was always in the rock. My job was just to cut away the excess." And that's what I think about when I'm talking to somebody about Jesus who doesn't like Jesus, doesn't like the church, doesn't like me because I'm a pastor. I realize, you know what? My job is not to see them convert to Christ. My job is just to cut away the excess. Because somewhere in there's a beautiful statue called eternity. And maybe, God, you'll give me the moment where I'll be with that person and they'll say yes. Or maybe I'm just chipping away another rock of preconceived ideas. But what I do know is this: eternity is in every person's heart. And when you begin to realize, you know what, my life is not just about this moment here, but my life is about the rest of eternity, things change. Contentment begins to settle. Because you realize, you know what, even if I mess up in this life in some way, shape, form or the other, the good news is this: when I get to heaven, I'm going to be faster than Usain Bolt. Man, I'm going to have a body. I'm going to have that V-shaped thing. I'm going to have the six-pack there, and not the six-pack of beer, but I'm going to have that six-pack. I'm going to be toned. I'm going to be stunning. I'm going to have an unbelievable mansion. It's going to be so amazing. The people who live in Australia by the beach, they've already given their reward by God. We're going to have bigger mansions for sure in heaven. And those Aussies who boast about the beach and Christmas on the beach, they can come and swim in your pool if you let them. But our reward is coming. It's so exciting to know this is not it. This is not it. There's something more.